in times with
treats
no
are.
staff,
You
where
want beer?
we would keep
Get
the
you
meetings
back
really,
to?
really
Pretty sure
short,
that's
and
what mine
then
would
we'll
do.
play catch up when everybody's
I
figured
love
out.
you.
Exactly,
Whatever
that's
you
exactly
wanna-
what he would do.
No, I
Just
think
sit right
that
on
we
the
have a
wall.
lot of things on here, but a lot of them are 2-minute things. So there's not a whole lot that needs a lot of discussion. So, hey there, Marcy. But do you guys know, have you gotten any more indication on when Zacharias might come up in front of the board or at least the staff?
So we have, let me log in.
I don't know,
Okay.
but he might know more.
Yes.
Staff tends to know more than we do.
It is now kind of at that stage where it's going out to the other referral agencies.
Okay.
So I'm still thinking probably like early fall.
So
Would
will we
be-
have one more meeting
Yeah.
before, okay?
Yeah.
Because if we're gonna make this recommendation, we need to vote, we
Yeah.
can't vote tonight. Now, if we needed to vote beforehand, because it's such an important topic, I think we would just call a special meeting for
Yep.
15 minutes and vote to get the recommendation. That would be a backup plan, but, so let's discuss that. I don't know, does Patrick do we have that? Do we need to bring it up, or do we have anything? I have one thing I wanted to add, or discuss, but I'll let others go first if they would like to.
I guess I had just a question, probably for you guys. What's the format that you would like to receive commentary like this in?
A Word doc that we could take the narrative and put in a much larger Word doc.
Okay,
Yep.
and is just prose okay, or should it be bullet points, or what would you like to read?
So we've already included the initial document, which I think format-wise works pretty well. I mean, once it kind of gets to planning commission, the board will do things like put it all into a 12-point font and justify it and make it kind of fit on our templates. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's a lot of data for everybody to read. I would definitely, formatting, want to see like your big must-have items. Let's not have those buried like on page 4 of a narrative. So maybe there's like
I mean, the recommendation we're
Yeah.
making right now is 4 paragraphs. It's like 2/3 of a page
that's
or half a
perfect.
page. I mean, that's about right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's also, sorry, go ahead.
Bold and red would be great.
Yeah. I was gonna say, thinking back to the community center process with ProStack, they almost kind of did both, where they had like some narrative and then reiterated, like, hey, just to be really clear, after you read this, here's our big, so they almost stated it twice in both formats. And I don't think that ever hurts. That way it's really clear. So maybe just give some thought to that, and formatting we can always work on. But once you guys submit it, we won't touch it. I won't we'll copy and paste it verbatim.
But it also comes in as a recommendation, so
Yep.
it will be in the minutes as a recommendation. I'll come down and read it at a board meeting, just to bring it to the forefront, and then you'll have it. So you'll have it from basically the minutes.
And then the other, at some point this will go to planning commission, and your recommendation will be included in the PC packet as well. So, depending on what the group wants to do, that'll happen right before the board meeting. They kind of happen concurrently. Planning commission gets it first, and then by that next board meeting, that's normally when the board sees it, so it kind of falls into line. So if you were interested, you can also make that kind of public comment to the planning commission.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And then it starts to really get captured, writing,
Yeah.
public.
Okay.
Maybe since Peter's here and someone might be watching, maybe you can summarize it real quick? or
Sure.
Is that asking too much?
No, let's do that.
People actually watch these.
Yes, you would be.
They do.
They do.
Yeah, I'm amazed,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay.
God, I should have done my makeup better.
Yeah, I'm wearing the wrong colors.
Yeah. Right, green shirt for the green screen, that's
Actually, a guy that I've known in town really kind of since I've started, who is, we've just known, he, after the last board meetings, texted me, he's like, oh, you're really, really getting bald. I was like, really? You're gonna watch the whole board meeting and then that's what you take away is you're gonna say that you can see my
He
bald
was
spot?
bald on the Monday board meeting.
Yeah, he was watching and he's like, you're really getting bald back there. I was like, killing me, man.
Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot, dude.
That's how you know somebody for quite a while when they're like, oof.
Well, they say the camera is like weight and does nothing good, you know?
Yeah, do you want to just read the paragraphs for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair amount to read, but sure. So this is the OSAC response to the park at Rock Creek, or Zaharias development proposal of May 7th, 2019. After reviewing the development proposal, OSAC notes several features that are positive for open space values, as well as several that do not fit with our current recommendations for habitat preservation around Hodgson Harris Reservoir. And then there's a URL for the position paper that we approved a while ago. On the positive side, we're pleased to see land deeded to the town for an open space buffer between the developed area and the reservoir. Dedicated water runoff detention areas in the absence of development in the wetland area along 36 should also reduce impacts on wildlife habitat. However, the width of the open space buffer is significantly smaller than OSAC's preferred 250-foot setback around Hodgson Harris Reservoir. In particular, the distance from the proposed swimming pool to the reservoir high water mark is only about 50 feet, and the retaining walls below the trailhead parking lot extend almost to the edge of the reservoir. Since the proposed trail along the reservoir extends into the open space buffer, this means that human activity would occur frequently within 20 to 80 feet of the edge of the reservoir. OSAC recognizes that a 250-foot setback would significantly cut into the amount of developable space on this property. If a smaller setback is approved, we recommend several changes to minimize human impact on the reservoir environment. These include removing the proposed trail along the south side of the development, halving the size of the trailhead parking lot, and installing fencing around the buffer area to prevent human and pet access. We suggest that small wildlife viewing areas could be placed just northeast of the trailhead parking lot and just east of the easternmost residential buildings. In all scenarios, OSAC recommends that buffer spaces and wetland areas be revegetated in a way that will optimize wildlife habitat using only Colorado native plant species. In addition, we recommend that the existing prairie dog colony be relocated and that a burrowing owl survey be conducted prior to any construction activity. Finally, OSAC is aware that previous developments in Superior have not been subject to such stringent setback and habitat preserving requirements. However, Hodgson Harris Reservoir represents a special case within the town, as it is a Boulder County designated critical wildlife habitat and one of the most significant remaining wildlife areas in Superior. As such, any development around it must proceed with special sensitivity to habitat conservation. So,
Yeah, I think it's well written.
so at this point, it's easy to edit, so.
My initial reaction, use this here, was the comment about the, if it's not 250, to include the fencing and remove the trail. I'm just wondering, even at 250, if we wouldn't want to say there needs to be some sort of fencing between the housing. I mean, I think regardless of the distance, we don't want dogs.
Right.
We don't want kids jumping the fence and running around in that area. It seemed like we should have the protective barrier regardless of whatever the buffer is. I don't know if you all agree, but that was the thing I gathered.
I like that idea. I don't like people and dogs being that close. I think that was one of the points that was raised at the last meeting and in our written comments.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of like the idea of the trail being out and just having viewing areas, period, which was also one of the things that was discussed, no matter what the buffer is.
I mean, between this meeting and our last meeting, I went on the bird tour over
Kathy?
with Kathy.
Yeah,
and it was awesome.
I did that.
Um,
It's really nice.
But the interesting thing was, is you could see their setback is about 100 feet. And when we would walk that close, the birds would start putting their wings up and getting defensive and starting to move away. So, 100 feet isn't enough.
Right.
Just from, simple observation. I'm not an expert, but you could kind of see their reaction. So if it was that close on both sides, where did they go? Then they could go down to the rocky part, but that's not really a habitat. So I think we have to stay pretty firm on this setback. I don't think we'll get 250 feet, but 100 isn't enough.
That tour is remarkable. I would recommend it to everyone.
Oh, it was
to-
so-
yeah,
it
And
was
she's so
awesome.
passionate about those birds and knows so much
Mhm.
about them.
The
Yeah.
other interesting thing about that trail that went in front of, kind of around the reservoir there, is that from the tour, you can also see why a trail behind Saddlebrook is nearly impossible. And I think Patrick was saying when they looked at that, the cost of that was,
6 million.
yeah, all the way along 36
Yeah,
back
because
in
of
there.
we couldn't touch the drainage, we'd have to do bridges.
And it would be so close to Saddlebrook in there, and it just seems like it's not, I never really looked at it, but it just seems like a trail back there maybe isn't such a good idea. And so then having a trail that comes in front maybe isn't as important if we aren't gonna loop around. I mean, still there'll be trails around the backside of it, but, anyway. So, and then the other thought I had is that if we say no trail, maybe we say even no trailhead parking instead of reduced. That was the only other thought I had.
I like the idea of no trail unless no parking.
So if you're gonna have a wildlife viewing area though, you probably wanna have a little bit of parking,
Oh, that's
because
a good
otherwise
point,
people
actually.
are gonna wanna be in that.
That's true.
And I think it's also proposed as a,
Thank
as a
you.
You can navigate
All right,
around,
cool.
this is the first.
36
Cool.
main
I
pages
remember
of
this one. Yeah,
36
thank you.
bicycle path. So maybe there'd be like park and ride parking there. I'm not quite sure what the vision is for that, but it might be.
Well, I guess though, I mean, Sandy, the Dr. Cog Trail will come along 88 somewhere, right? I mean, that would be
It
the
will come
thought.
up 88.
Right, so there will be-
The question will be where, does it come over from the other side, but it will come up 88.
Right, so maybe even then a trailhead makes sense because of that, where there will be a trail here that hooks into the commuter trail over right by the bridge. So, okay, I kind of reversed what I said then. So I like the language of there isn't a trail here. And like I said, this probably won't make sense. That this is a trail I'm saying won't make sense because it doesn't make sense to go around back behind there.
So the green area will be a trail.
That's the current proposal.
Yeah, that's the current proposal, right? Okay.
But again, do you guys remember which line is the high water? Oh, this is the high water mark is essentially this fence.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so man, it's still so close. I mean, people, this rendition has people right up on the high water. Anyway, so I think the language of, that security fence or whatever that fencing needs to be. But I guess the Saddlebrook, how do they handle dogs? I guess they have to be on leash over there and,
On the Saddlebrook side, you can go right up to the, to the Boulder County fence.
the split rail
Yeah,
fence
that
that they
split
have.
rail count is Boulder County fence, and so that would be the equivalent of the high water mark that you see on the north
Right.
side.
But if a dog was off leash there, they could just run down into the reservoir.
Actually, not very easily because there's a wire fence, attached to the
Oh,
back
they
of
do
it.
put- Okay, so in essence, there is like a security fence.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't have to be this really tall metal fencing, but just something to reasonably keep animals out.
yeah.
So, okay. Those were my comments. Anything? Kate or Marcy, anything you want to add or think we should change?
Is there anything that we need to cite as to why we're making that recommendation or that?
So it's in the position paper.
Okay.
The setback distances are based on the EPA guidelines.
Okay.
I will note that the Smith environmental survey was a little bit
Yeah.
not excited about specifying a setback.
Mhm.
So that does contradict a little bit with one of the other pieces of information that we have, so that's hard to say exactly which one is right. But I'd go with the federal government, because
Yeah, and what was the federal government? Was that 300?
it's 100 feet for a normal wetland, and for a habitat for rare or endangered species, they recommend 200 to 300
Okay.
feet. So that's
Okay.
where the 250 feet comes from.
Okay. So even if we get 200, that would be better than this.
Yes. Yeah, well, because I mean, you've got like
explicit about that part, that if it is less than 50 feet in parts, we're saying 250, are they gonna take that as 250 from the widest point, and then,
Yeah, that's a good point.
does that make sense, where,
250 from each high water, from the entire high water mark line, instead of like an average or
Right, right.
at the most, or I think
Right.
that's a good point. I mean, the one corner right here is,
exactly, that's.
that's gonna, I mean, you could do it though, right? And I think it does matter, right? If it's a close point, that's where trash is gonna get in there
Mhm.
easier and whatnot. Okay. No, Peter, I appreciate the legwork you did on that. I think it's well written, and I think it's succinct, backed up by our position paper. I think it's good.
So it's 250 feet from the high water mark?
Yeah.
Is that what we decided? Okay.
But if you look at that, I mean, this is 135 feet.
Right.
So you're another in here, right? I mean, that cuts out, I mean, what that would, my guess is what that would mean is that, because there's a certain percentage that has to be open space, right, by the zoning?
Yep.
And so that's what this is also accomplishing. So my guess is that this would get filled in and it would get added. I mean, that's just a guess, but
Yeah.
because there is that percentage, right, pushing this back would fill in that percentage. But then you've almost got military-style barracks, I mean, apartments on top of apartments in there. But I get it, right? I mean, the
But-
property prices, I mean, what did we determine? It's like $250 an acre over there, or the normal price is 80 to 100? Or it's just an expensive piece of property. So I see why it has to be high density to make the finances work. Not that I like it, but I see why that's the plan.
Well, I think irrespective of all that, we need to stand firm.
Oh, I agree. I mean, the wildlife there is spectacular.
It's too important. I mean, we don't have it.
Yep. But I think we've done a good job. I think we've got our position paper, it's out there. Now we've got specific recommendations on this development. I mean, I think we're in good shape.
Have you shown this to Kathy?
This
Yeah.
proposal? No, I really try to keep that separate from
Okay.
the breeding bird survey stuff, the committee stuff.
Yeah,
separate
I
from
think we
that.
should until it's made public.
That's true, because she would be more of a public comment. I'm just wondering if it, since she's our bird expert.
Mhm.
Well, I think, we know what she wants. She wants that to be, same thing we ultimately want,
She
right?
wants all that
But-
to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So why don't I go ahead and make these additions, just make sure that our non-negotiable points are in boldface or, highlighted in there in some way, and then I'll come back and we can maybe vote on it next time.
And I think you've got it in the right order. I mean, you do have it in, it seems like the order, I mean, they're all important, but in that, the setback is pretty much the first thing you say that's bad about it, so I think it's good. But yeah, you might want to bold, like, the exact, maybe in the paragraph, the piece that needs to stick out the most in each paragraph. Yeah, that'll be good. So what I'll plan to do is, for the agenda for next time, it'll be discuss and recommend, instead of just discuss this. And hopefully we'll have quorum and be able to vote on it. And if not, the plan will be to meet outside of that meeting to make sure we get this approved before anything comes up before the planning commission. So, cool.
I'm gonna look that up really quickly.
Patrick, anything? Okay. All right, well, let's move on to the Shan Shan Trailhead amenities. So,
No, Sean.
yeah, well, we finished that last time. Well, I think the whole committee is not here. So, Patrick, I guess the main question I have there was that I think the next step is you were trying to shell in numbers so that we can send that up as a budget
Yep.
proposal.
So, yeah, exactly. So we've started kind of the costing process. And I've actually brought kind of just the notes that we worked out. For the most part, we're we're getting pretty close to finished. So we're looking at that small, being around $20,000. And just to kind of give you guys the quick reminder on the small, it was signed with labeled mountain peaks. You know, there were some, I do have some questions, you know, so there's like a strong effort to keep trees and shrubs on the parcel undisturbed. Obviously, there's no cost with that. You know, dog waste stations were included. That's, you know, with waste bins, that's about, you know, $200. Historical signage, you know, same thing, $400 to $1,000. You know, I see some notes about the maps, so I have some follow-up questions, because that's stuff we would just eat out of like an operational budget. You know, the one item that kind of stuck out on the small was, you know, a refill water station with water bottles. And, you know, we initially got a price of like 10 grand. But that's to also bring the water to it, so we weren't too surprised by it.
Okay.
You know, an info center, I got some pricing for an information center similar to what's down at the Colton Trailhead, and that was about 5 grand. So really for the small option, we're probably looking anywhere between, you know, 20,000 and 25, which is kind of about where we thought we would be. And
How much was it again?
I would say right now between 20 and 25,000. Just not fully understand it. You know, the install cost is what will ultimately kind of drive that up. If we do it all at once, you know, maybe a little bit higher. So right now we're kind of just looking at those, the costs to purchase. So that medium, which had, you know, a preservation and highlight of the old rail bed. Obviously, there's no cost there. Shade trees, potentially some mature, heavy on the east side to provide noise and site buffer. I just kind of generally plugged in a $15,000 number based upon other projects that we've done. $15,000 for that area will get us some decent screening. And I feel like that would probably accomplish what you guys were wanting. Obviously, before we did anything, you guys would be able to review it. This also had bird identification signs. We kind of lumped that into the $400 to $1,000. What got interesting here is, you know, restrooms, running water, plumbed that look like a rustic outhouse. This is where, you know, that's $250,000 to 300,000 based upon us connecting back over to the sanitary sewer line. You bike maintenance station, we have pricing right around $500 installed, which I think is great. We're still waiting for pricing on the stairway for the exercise from the lower to the top. You know, we looked at concrete, and that was like almost unreasonably high. So then we started looking at more like the railroad ties, and that's kind of what we're pricing out right now. And then we've got pricing for a permanent pit toilet at right around $22,000.
That's a big price difference between.
Yeah.
Is it
With
20?
this, without this.
Yeah, so 22, so the difference on just the, you know, 22 for a pit or 250 for a plumbed. But there is precedence in the town for having them year round. I mean, the board has asked us to do that stuff, so. You know, and then going over to the large, you know, Xeric Landscaping with signs explaining different plants, you're only talking a couple $1,000. Picnic area with tables and benches, $5,000 to $10,000, completely doable. So we did not, so there was a train depot, like architectural elements, for example, used on any of the buildings. That's the kind of finished stuff that may be a little bit hard for us to determine. So I've kind of like moved those almost into a separate, we'll probably just assign a percentage markup for the aesthetics. EV charging stations, I'm still waiting on some numbers back from the guys in Public Works. Pavilion, a small pavilion that would provide weather protection. It says small occupancy, 6 people. I've got 2 different pricing. One, about $18,000 for a pavilion that was pretty generic and basic, and then $21,000 for something that's a little bit nicer, more of an octagon shape. The warming hut with the shelter, I had some follow-up with you guys on exactly what, you know, is that like a small enclosed build? Are we thinking more of like a bus shelter with a heater in it? So without having the whole group here, maybe what I can do is type up my questions and just send them back.
Okay.
And then the interpretive garden, if we were looking more kind of vegetable garden, we're like right around, 15,000, depending on the size. But if we're looking more of like interpretive with more like native plants that aren't, we're talking only probably $5,000-6,000. So I think that those initial WAG numbers, and I'd have to go back and look, but what we basically will do is I'll present this in a much more cleaned up way to the entire board and give them that range. So I'll send my questions to you guys.
Okay.
Mostly just the aesthetics. I want to make sure I was really kind of understanding, and the warming hut. Because, we were looking at some that just look like a bus station. Well, I don't know if that accomplishes what you guys envision it for. Are we thinking more of like a 10-person or something that's more like a closed-in pavilion with like a view corridor kind of thing? Then, so maybe I can even bring some examples
No, that'd be good.
for our next conversation. But yeah, I'll present this as anywhere from 20K, right now it shows 20K up to 350 in the budget. And I think that's, and you can correct me, when the board asks for small, medium, and large, we'll give them the whole range, and then we can kind of detail it out. And kind of like your other recommendation, really having those must-haves, I think will be good for me to understand as part of the budget process. But
It's gonna be-
Well, shouldn't we add a column, though? It's not only to get the stuff up, but to maintain it every year thereafter. And that's where the big bucks can come in. I mean,
Right.
if you're putting in a $250,000 bathroom,
Exactly.
they're gonna cost a lot of money every year to maintain.
So here's what's interesting, and I promise I won't bore you with it. So I've plugged those numbers in because they're in a whole separate
But those are
budget.
important.
So
for
I've
the
got
board.
those. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and how that'll look on our spreadsheets is if this decision is made,
Yeah.
this number goes to
You're
here.
gonna be paying so much
Yeah.
every year.
And the restrooms,
Yeah.
the restrooms, the big one. So we've already priced out, like I know our water costs, I know electricity costs, I know janitorial costs. So we're prepared to roll those numbers based upon the decision. So when we present this to the board, Marcia, it's a great point. So I'll do the one-time capital cost, and then I have a
Plus
whole other,
annual-
yep,
Annual residual
yep,
costs.
and the board will see that.
I mean, the warming hut will cost money. If you put in a picnic area, you're gonna have more garbage and.
Yeah, so
I mean,
all,
I see
yep.
money.
Yep. And the way that the finance department has our CIP request spreadsheets, that we go through that level of detail with the board.
Okay,
So,
good.
So the next step for us is to wrap this up at the next meeting.
Yep.
But then, as part of the budget process, do we need to make a more formal recommendation, or are we good?
you're good. I will say, I'll keep you guys informed on when we actually meet. Unfortunately, most of them happen during the day because it's such a long process. It's completely acceptable if somebody from the group has a couple minutes and wants to come down and just sit with me and explain it from the committee's mouth is
Okay.
also helpful. That's happened with ProStack before and CAPS before, and I'll keep you guys in those loops. We don't have those dates scheduled,
Okay.
but it's kind of like this. We sit at tables here, and the board's here, and it's just back and
Okay.
forth. What's this cost,
Okay.
maintenance cost, long term? When are you going to replace it in the future, kind of stuff. So I love when you guys come down and do that because they're hearing from you, not from me, on the amenities.
About when do those happen? Is it in August or September?
Yeah, I would say August,
Somewhere in August?
into August, September.
Okay. So, and then for the group, what are our next steps are really just to see what the board approves and then take it from there. I know Sean has some other ideas on what might be next, but I'll wait till he comes and he can talk through those ideas.
And there is kind of an interim step in that I take every request that we have for the entire department and send that to Paul and Jeff in the finance. They compile everything from all the other departments, and they'll start to kind of say, all right, this isn't making sense. You have way more requests than you do
Sure.
money.
Sure.
Because this was a board request, it's in the budget. But those guys may come back to me and say, hey, yeah, we can do a $250,000 toilet, but that means Public Works needs to cut this out of their budget. And sometimes the board and staff will kind of have those preliminary discussions before that final date. And I'll just keep you guys in the loop, you know, but, you know, I want you guys to be part of the process. I think it's kind of an informative process.
And from what, would it make sense to have a visual, like a poster or something to talk about it? If we had it and we could, you know, number them and say, you know, this is where the small is focused up here.
Yes.
And then we start expanding to medium down here, and here's where we think the stairwell would go and where we think the bathrooms would go.
Absolutely.
So if we were gonna do that, we would need help.
Yeah.
Who would help us with that, or?
Well, I have a couple thoughts, depending on the level of detail. I mean, it could be as easy as us working with those 2 sheets that Sean has, which we provided, and kind of doing the more, like the presentations we do, where it's a picture with an arrow.
I think
If we
that's-
wanted a higher level of detail, you know, and you guys were interested in asking the board for, you know, $5,000 out of open space fund, then you can have somebody kind of CAD it in there. But if you're talking just, we're thinking this image
Right, we
here.
could actually do this work, right? It would really just be to take an image, draw
Yeah.
arrows, annotate, and then have, you know, kind of like the maps are done.
Absolutely.
Like the map we had at 4th of July with the town and where the parks were and where the trails were. I think that's all that's all I was thinking.
And if
That might
it's-
help to talk through it.
Yeah, and if it's even, you know, Allison or I do it, or with Sean's input or your guys' final input, or you guys give it a rough one and we put it into the final format,
Okay.
works for me.
So I think that's something we should just bring back to that committee to say, see if they're open to that or what they want to do with that. So, okay. Well, that seems like that was a fair bit of work getting that together. Appreciate
Good
it.
job on it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, this has been a really thorough process, so it was informative. I think it's gonna make for a good recommendation. We'll just see how it falls into the rank of everything else.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, the next item was the trail ranking results. You know, we could delay this till more people are here, or we can send it out. I mean, I looked at it, and, you know, maybe we should just bring it up. Patrick, do you have that from Kate's email? You know, it's basically the next, well, I don't know, when I looked at it and I sorted everything, it kind of comes out the way I would have expected it to. Nothing seemed to be surprising to me in the results, you know, with downtown connectivity being number 1, like the top 3 were that, the Shan Shan Trailhead, the Dr. Cog Trail that's already being built. So those all made sense. And then the underpass at Davidson Mesa was, you know, the next one. So everything seemed to actually, nothing deviated too much from last time.
Yeah.
What's interesting is where some of the newer trails that we had on there came in. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, we just open it in the folder.
Oh, that's the trailhead. We have the,
Sorry about that.
no problem, maybe the set one right below that, the trail plan.
There it is. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no worries. Okay,
Yep, here we go.
cool, thank you. So,
And I'm just gonna hit
yeah,
enable
awesome.
idling, so if you guys want.
I'm not
to
gonna
use-
save it.
Okay.
We're not gonna make any changes to it. So, there's a lot in here. What I really wanna focus on is just sorting by, these guys here. It's weird, why won't it, doesn't wanna enable the editing, does it?
Uh-oh.
I mean, I am clicking in the right spot, right? But like even.
You know what, here, let me,
Oh, wait, maybe there's a,
yeah, if you want to close it, and that folder should still be open if you want to try it
yeah,
again.
I'll just try it again. And Marcy, if you want to sit over here, if that's easier.
That, I
feel
have a
free.
copy right here.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go, thank you. So yeah, so ranking them by the high, medium, and low. So and remember the numbers here were the priority that they came out from the combined rankings from last time with OSAC and ProStack. So Town Center, #1, and then tied with the Davidson Mesa, Dr. Cog Trail. I can make this a little bigger. I know that font's pretty small. And then the Shan Shan Trailhead, obviously. You know, it's kind of hard to rank those when you know they're happening, but then again, why wouldn't you rank them high if you know they're happening? So 3A was interesting, that's a new one, but that's not just having, you know, making sure we figure out how we connect to that Davidson Mesa underpass, right? There's some ideas, and this would be something we would want to talk to Louisville about, you know, and what their plans are to connect over there. This was the little piece just connecting right along Marshall, like the trail just dead ends right by the bus stop, so it's just connecting that. I think Patrick, you said that's just a matter of getting easement before you guys can put that in, so that makes sense. Single Tree to Coal Creek Regional, I always forget which one this is, so let me, I don't know if we have the map in here.
Do you see that folder that says OSAC Trails Plan?
Cool.
That's
This is good
what
enough.
was right by Rogers Farm there.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, which number was it? Number 4, oh yeah, number 4.
And it might have changed a little bit, but
Yeah, oh, and this one, yeah, okay, and so this one, yeah, that's basically just connecting right here and through the new development, but basically having the bridge over the river so you don't have to loop around. And the current thought, at least for me, is that that'll be part of the developer. When they come with the next piece of that plan, that'll get included. We'll see. The soft trail between McCaslin from the water treatment plant to the entrance to High Plains, we talk about that one all the time, about how to get around there and what the grade is and what's ADA compliant. This Heritage Trail, which was a new idea, showed up near the top, so that's pretty cool. This one was interesting that it actually fell this far, but this is the soft trail from McCaslin from South Indiana to Firestone. So this is basically just McCaslin on the south side from coming down the hill, trying to get people down to the Colton Trailhead. That one always had ranked pretty high, just because it was focusing on getting people from Interior to Superior out to the open space. That's you know, historically when we've done this, what I recall why that one was high. Soft trail from McCaslin from Fire Station to Calmonte. That's the piece behind Calmonte that would go along with this trail. And then I don't know how far we need to go down this, but I mean, this all makes sense to me. Like, it all seems about, you know, it's not the same that we've always ranked it, which is good, and there's some good new ideas in here, but it all seems, it feels right to me. So I don't know if you guys have any comments or questions, or, you know, we do it every year. I think it's insightful to learn about the trails and, you know, where the priorities have been in the past and where they'll be going forward.
How does this get combined with what ProStack ranks?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think historically we've just sent it to ProStack and Corey, their leadership will combine it. But then does it come back as a recommendation? I don't remember how we've done that in the past.
it's kind of changed. I think that what I'm hearing from the board is that you guys would like to see it in its final state. So yeah, I think it'd be good. You know, as a combined recommendation, we'd include it in the notes.
Okay.
And also, you know, just remind you guys, if for whatever reason you guys don't fall on the same page with ProStack, we've submitted 2 in the past before. The board always likes it when you guys work to try to combine them, but if there's some areas where you don't want to budge, that's fine too.
Well, and what the document looked like in the past is it shows OSAC's ranking, ProStack's ranking, and then the combined. And then actually what Ken and either it was Peter or Corey had done in the past, was there were a couple that each had a particular interest in, that they would, in a leadership meeting, say, hey, this one's really important to me, do you mind if we swap this priority? You know, these were really close, do you mind if we swap the ranking? And usually it hasn't been contentious, so I think that, I really don't like submitting to. I just think for everything about creating extra work and, you know, why are two committees doing this, that's probably not a good plan.
Yeah.
But if we really felt otherwise, you know, we could do that. So what we'll do is I'll send these to Corey. He'll combine them, and then we'll see the joint results, and then we'll, I guess it still isn't clear though. So will we need to make a joint recommendation, or do we not need to make a recommendation?
I guess we've always viewed it as once you agree on your list, the language is just this is OSAC's and ProStack's combined
Okay,
trails
so we'll
ranking.
both make a recommendation to send it up, okay.
And I was just clarifying with Sandy, you know, we're still in the process of redoing the town's website.
Mhm.
So once you guys make a final recommendation, this document will live on your OSAC page within the website as
Okay.
well. So,
This hasn't been, I don't think it's been there before.
no, it hasn't, but
Okay.
I think that there's a renewed,
We're all about
No, I
transparency.
think it's fine.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I think our feeling is it generates discussion for the community too, to see where you guys ranked them, and, because not everybody wants to go back and
Well,
look
if
at
they
them.
disagree, come to the meeting,
Yeah.
talk to us,
And then
talk
they
to us
can
at
say,
Fourth of
well,
July,
why that
talk to us
one
at Chili
or,
Fest about.
you know, because I'm not sure in all cases people even know what the trails are that are out there that you're thinking about. So it's another good way to create awareness and hear from the community about what they like.
And so just a reminder though, that the ones that we ranked that are red were new. And so they won't show up in the combined ranking. They'll show up. They actually probably won't show up at all in the document. It was for us to get a feel for that and having it be material so that we can get a combined list together early in the work plans next year. So the notes we have there is that making sure ProStack and OSAC both in Q1 have a meeting to define what the list is that we rank. 'Cause
Which
that's
was-
the piece we.
And it was mentioned in their ProStack meeting.
Okay.
That they did mention that earlier in the meeting.
Okay.
About
I
making
missed
sure
that,
that
so
that
that's good.
gets on, that we do that in January and February, so.
Let me make sure,
They're
I will
on-
make
they're
sure that that's
on the same
on
page.
our work plan. Okay, so my next step, now Marcy, we haven't seen yours yet, there's still time. So if you're gonna be able to get it in, but if not, then I'm just gonna send it. So
Okay,
you can let me know either way, maybe by the end of the week, I'd appreciate it.
okay.
But otherwise, your next step is to send it to Corey,
Yeah,
and then.
exactly.
Whenever he gets them done,
And then, and I'll ask him, if he wants me to combine them, great, or if he wants to do it, historically, he's just like to do it, but I don't mind putting it together, because we'll all need to agree,
Yeah,
so.
okay.
It's just whoever decides to do the work. Okay? Any other questions or comments, or, okay? All right, we're cruising right along. So the open space summary and report, or report and recommendation. So the document is ready to go, I hope. I stared at it so much that I
I
solicited
feel like
some
it's
help.
great, it's perfect, right?
Proofreading. But, when you're that close to something, you might be missing, the forest between the trees. So if anybody has anything, that they want to see different or anything, now is the time to talk. The only question here, again, Patrick, is does this become a recommendation? Just to submit, we'd like the board to accept the next summary report. Last time when we did it, it was kind of a big deal because it hadn't been done in 13 years.
right.
So we came down and presented it and talked through it and answered any questions. This one is a lot more incremental since the last update. So,
Let me ask around on the best way to do that.
because we can just say at the next meeting, we can have the recommendation written, and we recommend the board accept the new open space summary report and recommendation. Feels a little
I would say that, you know, if it's if it's an update to an existing document,
I
just
think we got-
notifying the board that it's been updated
Yeah,
and in the minutes. I mean, why don't I do this? Why don't I kind of follow, because I don't want you guys to do a ton of work if the board's just kind of give it a head nod.
right.
But it was, you know, it's a big enough document that I want to make sure that they're aware.
I mean, I don't think either way, the only work it creates is the next meeting, we'll have the recommendation written and we vote that we're ready to
Okay.
send it out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fairly straightforward. Because I don't think there's any work left on the document.
Let's do that.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't hurt.
So I will word the recommendation before the next meeting, and it'll just be, assuming we have quorum. If not, you know what, something I need to do before the next meeting is actually get a poll of who thinks they can be here.
Okay.
Because if not, then maybe we want to try to schedule, we've got enough things here that we need to make recommendations on, that maybe we'll need to say, hey, do we have can we meet 30 minutes? Can we find a day to meet for 30 minutes and vote on these items?
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, would you please,
Yeah.
Kate? And like I said, the document didn't change that much. We removed the Anderson property. We provided an update to the Rogers property and the Zaharias property. We added track 13 or track 919 in Original Town. That was a new block. And then we added some language on best practices to use nonprofits, you know, that we've had success with on our CenturyLink property. And there were a few status updates. You know, that was been the interesting thing, is the list of, these were the properties from the original document, here's what's happened to them. They've been either purchased
Yeah,
and.
the chart's really good.
Yeah, that's been interesting, and also has the price per acre on that. That was also an interesting stat as we went through that, so. Okay, so we have a way forward on that, so appreciate everyone's effort getting that done. Okay, Peter, the Bird Box Initiative.
All right.
Sorry, I assume you're still looking through, so I don't.
No, I've already looked through it.
Okay.
And I think it's good.
Okay,
I mean,
good, thank you.
I love that chart where it does the update on one page, yeah.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
that's the kind of thing we should highlight to the board and whoever,
Yeah.
what's
Great.
actually happened.
That's actually a good point. If we present it, we'll highlight that, because it is a lot of change.
I would like kind of move it up closer to the front, you know, these are the changes, so people don't have to read the whole thing to get to the changes. That's my
Yeah,
idea.
that's something to consider.
Yeah. You know how quickly one's attention span goes.
Okay. All right, sorry, Peter.
Right, so we all remember that earlier in the year, Vanessa had been working with Allison about trying to put web cameras onto some raptor nests around town. And so that work has kind of been going on, has kind of kicked up again early this summer. Unfortunately, Vanessa is not here to tell you the exact details on it, but I'm deputized to give kind of an overview on that. So just as a reminder, where's my document here?
I haven't printed out.
If you wouldn't mind me just
Here.
kind of glancing at that,
Here's
thanks.
printed out.
Sorry about that. So Vanessa's Raptor program has identified something like 10 different existing nests in trees around town, but none of those is really close to the appropriate infrastructure of power and network to install a web camera. So the idea is to install nest boxes for cavity nesting raptors with a webcam inside of it, and these can be placed in more advantageous locations. And so so staff and Vanessa have worked with a guy named Scott Rashid, who runs a nonprofit Raptor Institute in Colorado, and its initials are CARRI. It's just called CARI. So Scott from CARI came down a couple of weeks ago, toured around town with some of us to just look at different locations for where it made sense to put boxes. And he recommended that there were 3 different species that we could target: barn owls, eastern screech owls, which are these kind of cute little forest owls about this big, and American kestrels, which are a small falcon. And it looked like the location, and Patrick, jump in here, you know, if I'm misremembering any of this. It looked like the best location that was good for the birds and also had the necessary infrastructure was the public works area down by the dog park and Autry Park. So where the wastewater treatment plant is basically. And it looked like it would be possible to install a barn owl box probably up inside the breezeway. Is that what you were getting in the water treatment area? And also to put a kestrel box nearby, either on a pole or attached onto a building. And it sounds like there would be reasonable ways to put power and network onto both of those.
Yep. And the only thing I would add to that is, so one of the interesting things we learned on the walk is that sometimes these draw too much public attention, which then becomes a negative. So this public works area was not really high on our radar, but then, this guy became really excited about it because he was wanting to find a location that wouldn't, like the novice, that could potentially harm the birds by coming out too much. So.
Oh, I see, because they couldn't, there's a fence, so you.
Yeah,
couldn't walk up
and
to
what
the
we
fence.
had kind of agreed to is
Oh.
when he needed to come out, or OSAC wanted to partner, or Vanessa, or whatever this turns into for an education process for the banding, then we would just grant him access, because that's where all of our parks equipment is. We would take him down there into this secured area, and it would be probably the safest environment that we can come up with. And that didn't occur to us. We'd assume like the more pristine nature, the better. But then he had mentioned on a couple of occasions that people come and they'll damage the box, or they'll want to climb up and look inside the box, or they're there all hours of the day taking pictures is something that he mentioned, and they throw the birds off of their normal pattern.
Interesting.
So that was kind of an interesting thing to learn, that the site that we weren't really thinking would be all that great, but it did have power and internet, he seemed to like that too, which was kind of fortuitous.
Yeah, so the recommendation that Vanessa and I had thought was to put those two boxes for those two species at that site. The nice thing about the barn owls is that they are nocturnal, and the kestrels are diurnal, so you could watch one all day and one all night if you decided you didn't want to sleep for 3 months. But yeah, having a daytime box is good for like classes, school classes that want to, science classes that want to look at it during the day. And then, in the evenings, people can watch the owls do their thing. And then in addition, there's like 6 or 8 other locations around town that could potentially support boxes, but not with webcams. And I think Patrick mentioned just briefly that that Cary does a banding of the nestlings. So they actually put an identification band on the leg of each nestling, and they'll do an educational program along with that. So a small group of people can go out to the nest site. He'll take a nestling down out of the box, and people can kind of look at it, attach the band, and put it back in. And they do this, kind of quickly, but you can have an educational program before and after. So even if there's not a camera on it, there's still a way to kind of get people involved with the process. And so, assuming that you all are good with going ahead with a couple of webcam boxes down at Public Works, do we want to try and do a couple more in other locations with a caveat that they wouldn't have webcams and they would be in a bit more of a public area? And so the places that they might be would be Rock Creek Lawn Community Park, around the South Pool, kind of in that Coyote Ridge open space area. Where else do we have, like Ridge 2,
We had
possibility, Grasso Park.
Yeah, I was going to
actually-
say right here behind town, he thought one of the owl species would be successful over here.
Yeah, screech owls, he thought would be in there. The downside of that is there's construction potentially right nearby. So that's hard to say for sure. Possibly up at Key Bank, between the Shan Shan Trailhead there. I don't know what our access to that property is with respect to, like, how much of that the town owns and how much is Boulder. It's kind of a question. The Oxnard open space, Town 15, northwest side of Sagamore, and then the far southwest part of the town behind Maroon Peak,
Yep.
down there.
And with the kestrels, he had recommended almost like a distance apart, and it was kind of cool because right, like, as we were in Community Park, like, the kestrels were out.
Yeah,
Which was like
cool.
really cool. He had some interest in saying if we put up a box, if the group that was in the tree would self-select like into a different, more kind of, I wouldn't say a safer environment, but he was kind of interested to see if they would abandon their existing nest and move into this more secured nest. It was it was definitely interesting listening to him talk about it.
Yeah, this guy's been doing this thing for like his whole professional life and knows everything there is about this kind of stuff. It's like, whew,
I would assume
tidal
since
wave
we're
of
not doing
information.
webcams in these other boxes, they're gonna be really inexpensive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking,
Like-
what are we talking per box? Like $100?
Not even.
Not even,
Not even that.
yeah.
So, and that's, we did have the dialogue, and Peter, hopefully I'm not gonna, some of this stuff, I think we could probably pull the trigger on now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the open space fund is a healthy fund. This is, in my mind, such like a low risk, high reward financially. We've got some elected official support. I think some of this stuff, yeah, maybe the webcam we deal with like next year, early next year. These are $50 boxes, you know, and we're already looking at purchasing the poles. That's, for us, we just need to figure out where we can get old telephone poles from.
Mm.
So, yeah, if you guys find that this is something you really, yeah, that's true. We're excited to pull
Well,
the trigger on
this is all part of our work plan, wildlife encouragement, right?
Yeah.
We finally
Right.
found something that we're latching onto, and,
Right.
you know, you guys have really driven this. I don't see why we wouldn't do this.
Yeah,
But so this, again, this just come back down to a recommendation. We would make a recommendation for the
And
board
that's
to
what comes
direct
this
town
spring,
staff
right?
to
Yep.
spend open space
We'd be
dollars
putting them up
to.
now, but no one's gonna
I
move
mean,
in until-
do we ever get concerned that there might be
When do they move in?
a negative feel of this, that it's not saving the money to buy properties, but we're spending it on other things? Or is it just such a small amount of money that it doesn't,
yeah.
it's a rounding error in the fund and it's encouraging open space activity?
That's how I view it as staff. I've kind of floated this by the finance guys. If it were, you know, 20,000, yeah, it'd be different. But, you know, this is a couple $1,000 and paying the guy the hourly rate to come and again, I looked at it as more of the environmental outdoor education piece of it, and this is almost just the tools to accomplish that.
Okay.
I think
So-
we're getting a lot of bang for our buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. We'll take it out of your coffee fund.
Boom. There it is, done.
So, but if you don't do the cameras now, does that mean that's a whole nother year before folks get to it? Because it sounded like from Vanessa's conversation that you gotta have it in there by February.
Yeah, and again, I think even what we were talking, so we were gonna work with this gentleman on the camera cost. I mean, and even then, he was giving us some Louisville numbers that were like less than $1,000. I mean, it's not, these are not huge line items. And
I'd sacrifice some of my snacks.
yeah,
I'm gonna get that in a minute.
I totally think it's a great
I'm only
idea.
one person, but I
Yeah.
do eat a lot of snacks.
I think we should come with a proposal. I think we should, I mean, I'm in favor for doing all of it.
Right.
And if the board says no,
Yeah.
we could come back with a lower cost option as a second pass. I just think we need to,
I think we should launch
I
it
think
on
we
our
need to get
website
the-
and make a big
Exactly.
hoopla out of it, you know, maybe have something at one of
Yep.
the boxes and, yeah.
You
so
know-
we probably need to get the amount figured out, and then when we know the, you know, approximate.
yeah,
maybe we
or
are-
not, so we were talking about this just a little bit ago about, you know, maybe it's a not to exceed initially for materials.
Okay.
You know, the gray area is maybe his hourly rate. Like once these get going, I think that from what I was getting is there was probably a little bit of us all figuring each other out. And then he kind of gets into a groove of how frequently he would need to come out. But then it was great because he even said the majority of what we pay him just rolls right into his nonprofit. Like we're basically.
Why do we need him again? I'm sorry. What does he do? He comes out and checks they're in the right spot and
And
he's
he
gonna ban the
monitors and he
birds.
bans
He's gonna
them.
ban them.
Yeah.
And banding the birds is okay? You can put them back without the birds
Yeah,
rejecting
I would
them?
probably have to defer, but it seemed like this was a fairly
I always thought you
common.
don't handle wild animals, they'd get rejected.
So you have to do it in a special way, and you have to have all the permits and training and that kind of thing to be able to do it in a way that is as least disruptive as possible, as I understand it. He showed us
Yeah.
all his kids and stuff like that.
And he's one of he's one of a handful of people who are certified through the federal government to do this kind of, I want to call it data collection, but he's monitoring the population is the way that I got it. And he wants like $20 an hour or something, which seemed pretty reasonable compared to some of what we pay other consultants to do. So.
Well, maybe we could take the money out of that fund where we, sponsor the walks, the educational walks, maybe that could cover him,
Yeah.
because he's a
That's a
lot
great-
less
that's a great-
than that woman is in
Yep.
Louisville.
Oh, Ashley?
Yeah,
With
Ashley.
her-
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, maybe we go to 8 events or 7 events instead
Right,
of-
and then just use that money for him.
Yeah,
Allison mentioned, and maybe she had chatted with Vanessa early about it feeling like maybe you guys were interested in switching up, from some of the coyote stuff to progressing on to something else.
Yeah.
I love that idea, because I like the idea of, I feel like our environmental education aspect of our rec programming probably has the greatest potential to grow because we're not tied to a rec facility.
Right.
It's like using the outdoor assets that are great around us. So I think this would be
It'd be
Like I
a
said.
substitute, yeah, it'd be a good
Low
addition.
risk, high
It'd be
reward.
a good addition, yeah.
okay.
Because we were struggling with how to make it different from the years before.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
And he had, I don't remember, he's got stuff in Louisville, Lafayette,
Loveland.
Loveland, but it was kind of a no-go with Boulder County due to just I guess he couldn't monitor, I don't know. So, but he was in a lot of jurisdictions, and it felt like we kind of fit well into that puzzle.
But when could we get them up? I mean, we have to have them in by February? Is that, when's
Well, I think
when's
if
nesting?
we could make a recommendation at the next meeting, and then if we get it approved, we could,
Before winter
Yeah,
to
we
Yeah.
make
could-
sure the ground is soft enough
we
to
could go on.
install
I think he
them,
told Peter, Vanessa, and Allison and I that it was like if he didn't already have the box, it was maybe like a week lead time. He works
Okay.
with a local guy in Estes, literally like in his neighborhood. He says, hey, I need this box, and that guy makes it, and it's done.
Oh, okay.
And then we were already doing a little bit of research on buying reclaimed wooden telephone poles. So we've already found a couple of places that have them.
It's a terrific idea.
so we'll get a recommendation kind of pre-written for next time, something like we recommend not to exceed X number of dollars to install, the details of what we have outlined to not be, above that amount from the open space fund. And I guess, we might need a little help from him finalizing that. How much, what do you think the annual cost is? I mean, are we talking $500 a year, or are we talking 5,000?
No, not by, I was thinking like 1,500.
1,500?
And most of that is, in my mind, well, no, because we said data, so we'd be able to pull the data. The cost was gonna be higher if we needed to basically like use solar.
Oh,
So,
okay.
no, the cost, $500-600.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
that almost can come out of our discretionary 5,000
Mm-hmm.
for the year, with Ashley's programming or, however we work that. So, okay.
So with respect to timing,
Yeah,
Marcy
right.
had asked,
Right.
yeah, the Kestrel and the Barn Owl boxes would ideally be up by February, but January would be better because they start to have winter territories with the idea of what their breeding territory is going to be. So they're kind of checking it out ahead of time. For screech owls, the ones that would be down in Grasso Park, they actually start their territory the summer before. So the box has to be up by the time the leaves fall. So you would want to have it up there by the end of August if we wanted to do screech owl boxes for this year. So that's kind of a tight time frame for getting all the approvals. So that might just have to wait until a future year. Or we can try and rush it and get that ready to go by.
If he's only got a week lead time on the box,
So we can do it.
yeah, and we're making some kind of August recommendation. I mean, there is nothing to me that jumps out that this wouldn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a little bit of it's unbudgeted, so we do need to follow the board's process. But this, you know, this is a pretty low budget item. So yeah, we still absolutely have to go through the process, but I think what I'll probably do is almost give him the kind of, hey, you need to be on
Preliminary,
point. This
okay.
is what we want, make sure you have one. And then we'll already have the polls, because if it's not this year, then it's next year.
So our
You know,
next
and then
meeting-
maybe that's the first thing that he does in August, is that he does that first box.
Yeah, and he won't build the boxes until you've got a place to mount them. So
Right.
you have to have the poles.
Yeah,
in
that's right.
place
There we
before
go.
you'll build them. And, you know, the site inside the building has to be prepped or whatever.
Yep.
And he also wants to put the webcam in and do the configuration on that when he puts the boxes up.
Wouldn't those
So
be
that
the
would all
later
happen at
ones,
the
so?
same time, but that would be the later one.
Right,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
the urgent ones would be the non-webcam, non-power.
Yes.
Okay.
So our next meeting is August 14th. The board will meet a week after, somewhere in there. I mean, I don't know, we know when the board's August, are they on the website?
Here, hold on, I've
Yeah,
got it
it'll
up.
be the, whatever the fourth.
Do all our votes have to be in person?
Yes,
All in person, we can't do it, okay, on the
No.
phone or, okay,
they ruled on that, no,
Okay,
you have to be in
okay.
person for
all right,
quorum.
all right.
Looks like the 12th and the 26th of August.
So the 26th, so it,
When are we dropping leaves? Like,
It's hot. We don't drop
September?
leaves until, like,
In
October?
late
Not
September.
until after Chili Fest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always burning
It
out.
is.
no, it is, so I think we're.
so we've got maybe a month in there?
I mean, if it's the first week of September, or do you want to ask him?
I'll double check with him. He said there had to be leaves on the trees. So first week in September, or first half of September even, sounds like
Okay.
that ought to be fine.
Okay, okay.
I mean, unless it's,
Unless it's a weird year, which it already
Which
has
it
been.
already
Well, yeah, I know.
So,
cool. So, I guess I'll work with Vanessa to have a proposal that we can vote on next time. Patrick, do you want me and Vanessa to talk to your group about exact locations, or should we just say,
No, when we get to that point, I think maybe just doing like a property drive like we did. And
Okay.
then I would like for you guys to kind of put the X on the ground.
okay, so our proposal will just say X number of boxes,
Yeah.
X number of
Yep.
cameras. in over
Yeah,
someplace.
and or if he needs to be down, or we all do it together, but yeah, I want to make sure that we're digging a hole right where you guys want it to be.
Okay, fantastic.
So, the interesting thing is we have 4 recommendations we need to make at the next meeting. So, Kate, I'll work with you beforehand and we'll get that
if we have more.
organized. Yeah, well, that'll be a really important email to get out, just to see what people's schedules are, because
Yeah,
if not,
okay, that's nice.
we might even just consider, I mean, we're allowed to move our meeting. I assume we'd be allowed to move our meeting if we needed to. We could do it, you know, we could maybe do it a week early, and then we would be before that August 12th board meeting also. So, I know summer schedules are crazy, so, you know, who knows what we'd be able to pull off, but I could even get those doodle polls work pretty well. You just throw some dates out for when people are available, and you can see if we have quorum, so.
Well, school starts August 18th here, right? So people, no, when do they start? 15th? So people come back for that, right?
Yeah, our next meeting will be the day before.
That's early, because
So,
our
but if we
East
did
we
it the
start
week
later.
before, people do take a lot of vacation right before school,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
We'll just see though, you never
Yeah.
know, so that's an option. It's exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
just
great.
want to especially thank Patrick and Allison for the ton of amount of work that they put into figuring out all the information for this. And, you know, like you do for everything else, but I know this one has been especially time consuming, so.
It's just the little quirks of like not having great internet in a town that you would think would have great internet, but, so, we're excited. This was cool. And thank you guys for hanging out with us for the day.
Okay, well, we are on to the quick things. So Patrick, has there been any response from Louisville about a joint meeting, a date?
So I threw out the number one priority was the September 11th, followed by October.
Mhm.
Right now, everybody's leaning towards the September 11th date. I'll get a confirmation
Okay.
on their side here, hopefully soon.
So the issue there is going to be that I saw from their website, their meetings start at 7. So if we were doing a joint meeting even before from 6 to 7, that means we wouldn't be able to start our meeting till 7:30 by the time we drove back. So we would either need to, I actually think that might, maybe that meeting is just that and offsite. Maybe we just have an information session. Maybe we go grab some food or something or do it somewhere else afterwards. We're wrapping up a lot of the work plan stuff. Q3 wasn't as tight, so we might just be able to work it out, but that would be the meeting for that month. And if not, if we found we had a lot of agenda items, again, we might consider moving our meeting to be a week before or a week after or something to accommodate that Louisville meeting. But, okay, awesome, that's great, thank you. Town 15 concept planning. Okay, I put this on here just because we've been talking about how we're working with ProStack to come up with this joint recommendation. Last meeting we talked that we wanted to put the brakes on it a little bit because we think that the PROS master plan process is important, so that we're focusing on what the most important amenities that the town would need rather than the things that we think would be interesting. I guess the update is ProStack had a meeting 2-3 weeks ago. I don't even know how long ago it was, but they talked about this for 10 minutes. The gist of it, what I got from it was that they agreed. They were promoting the master plan for the same reasons that we had discussed. They would like to not entirely put the brakes on the process. They would like to work together to come up with a vision statement so that, and I thought their point was good, that when somebody comes and wants to use the town, for the board to be able to pull something and says, well, our committees say we have a vision for this land and it isn't in line with what you're proposing. And so I think the action for us, Kate, is to set up a leadership meeting and just take those next steps of drafting that level of the document, not all the amenities, but this vision plan. And it's not, I don't think it's that dissimilar from what we have in terms of our position paper. We wrote our Town 15 position paper. I think we would just expand that to be an OSAC, ProSAC position paper and have what we need for that process. So I think Sandy or Trustee Hamlin, hopefully you agree that that's a reasonable approach?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So we just need to reach out to those guys and see, Kate, when we can meet with them again. And then COSA conference is coming up in about 2 months. So the fact that half of our group isn't here, I'll just circulate an email to see if anyone has any interest. Tracy went 2 years ago, and that's where she met the Trust for Public Lands. That came out of that. Kate went last year, and if I remember, you had went into a lot of sessions on just education around open space. So ever since I've been on the board, the feedback from the conference has been pretty interesting. People have really enjoyed it.
It's 20th year.
Do we only send one person?
Yeah,
Only one?
person.
Mm.
So we'll just, take, if you want to go, I'll send an email out probably tomorrow. And if you're interested, let me know. If there's a bunch of people that are interested, we'll draw straws or we'll do something. I think that if nobody is interested, I will be available.
Have you been?
I haven't been. And so I definitely want to go. And the timing works for my schedule, but if other people are interested, we'll figure that out. But yeah, it's coming up, and it's been we've gotten good things out of it from our group, so I think we need to continue. So, okay.
And that, so 16th through the 18th, Steamboat Springs is the location.
Mhm.
Got it, okay.
Yep. It's not a horrible place to go in September.
No,
been.
Oh, it's gorgeous, it's,
I've heard.
yeah, it's,
Yeah.
and that time of year, traffic shouldn't be too bad, it doesn't take that long to get there, it's. maybe
Last
not-
year, we were in Grand Junction, and we had a meeting on Wednesday night when I was driving home, and there was an accident right in the Vail Pass. So I had to take like a 3-hour.
Oh, you had
Gotta
to go all
love
the way.
the Colorado, I had to go
Oh, so you got to go to Leadville and go all the way,
I was
oh,
like,
that's pretty.
I'm not making the meeting. Not tonight.
Oh, man.
Yeah. it was
Is that where the
crazy.
boulders fell? On the
I don't
road?
remember.
Yeah,
It was
okay.
early September. It was hot. It was like 90s. It was like 98 in Grand Junction the whole time. It was so hot.
Grand Junction could be hot, yeah.
It was really hot. And it was really cool. It was really fun.
Okay. Updates and look aheads, 4th of July. I don't know, great event, kudos to town staff, I mean, it was just
Thank you.
awesome. The band, the inflatables, where all the booths were, we had a great spot, a lot of people were coming by and talking to us,
Good.
so.
Yeah, we didn't, I meant to put out a debrief email like somebody had started from the last one, just if there were other takeaways.
That's okay, that's fine, I mean, we can talk about it, but we can have people email in too. You know, the maps are always a hit, people will always come up and look at a map and just wanna see where things are, and it just starts conversations, so.
We did have one, Peter and I had somebody ask if we had a map for them to take
mm.
of current trails.
You know, and the takeaway there is we didn't have the little passport maps
Right.
there. I think we still have those sitting, I don't know if we have those anymore at the front.
We didn't print them this year.
Oh, okay, so we don't have those, okay.
I mean, but that's good feedback because we always can. You know, something else,
It was one person, but
you know, something that just, we were looking at this year as a giveaway is, you can get your town maps like printed on a bandana. Or those like, you know, those,
Yeah,
almost like
the-
the buffs.
Yeah.
And we were like, huh.
That's kind of a cool idea.
So we actually, the buffs were a little more expensive. We were like, well, but, you know, I don't remember who on our staff, they saw one for Rocky Mountain National Park. And it was
Yeah.
like it was a good level of detail.
Yeah.
Like it would be a
all the
useful
parks,
thing.
all the national parks have them.
Yeah, and you can, so we were like, man, a bandana with the town of Superior map on it. So we may do that anyway. So, but we thought that'd be kind of a cool giveaway, whether it's, you know, you guys do it or the pools or whatever.
I mean, our sunscreen went fast. Maybe within the first 2 hours, we're completely out. So that tells you also that was good swag to have. So we're kind of building this repertoire of good swag. That and the dog food bags have been good for us. So and then this bandana could be cool.
Yeah.
So I had one guy ask about wanting to do a McCaslin underpass where the water goes under, you know, right where you come out by Key Bank. He's like,
Yeah.
that would be a really cool way, you know, as a potential trail or something to get people. I'm sure it's super expensive, but he was saying there's already you know, there's a water where the ditch, the Fright, I think.
Yeah, the Fright, okay,
ditch
all right.
comes right in there.
Yep.
He's saying, well, there's a ditch right there. Couldn't we just take half of that and make it an underpass? I'm like, well, it's a great idea. Like, it would be cool to have an underpass there to not have people.
It's not the first time that a McCaslin underpass actually has been mentioned, so.
But I think the takeaway for me there is when we talk about trail ranking, we should put that on as a new item for the groups to consider for the next round of trails. I know they're super expensive, but at some point, you know, getting across McCaslin up there somewhere could be pretty valuable.
You know, like, what might be kind of interesting, because we get these kind of one-off trail requests too. I wonder if we should just kind of formalize, like, hey, I got this request, and we literally just copy and paste it on the bottom of that spreadsheet annually. Because I know you guys get them, ProStat gets them. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's 5 people. But I know we kind of sometimes struggle with we'll be at an event and somebody will say, hey, why don't you have a trail here? So,
I think a better process to get that kind of feedback in. We need to be better about it, so whatever that is. I mean, I think just keeping the list, and then when we have our meeting, we have the ones we've collected up. If you guys could submit the ones.
right, we almost need like a
you know.
running, you know, because I was thinking back to the
Yeah.
conversation that you guys were having about, well, Sean had a request for a trail, and then, you know, that kind of moved up to the top of the list, but we get a lot of one-offs all the time.
Has there ever been a more formal public engagement process than that?
When we did the 2016 expedited trails, we actually found a process that the city of Westminster did with like an open source GIS map, where people could go in and almost draw their own connections, and then you can like dialogue around that.
That's kind of cool.
So maybe you dust off something like that where we have I don't know, I'm sure we can find somebody to do it. That had like the base layer of what we have and then what's proposed and then like a fill in the blank activity or something. And then it just can live on the website or something.
Yeah, because that was actually one of the sessions I went to last year with Jeff at COSA, was Jeff did a whole, what are your dreams and desires for trails? And they admitted, Jeff was huge.
Right.
They were like, they had hundreds of proposals that they went through, and they went through a whole process. But it was also really cool and really valuable, and they had to explain why they wouldn't do some, and why some of them would work a little bit better. But people were super, super, super engaged in it, and they were like, our big takeaway was don't do the whole area, obviously because it's so huge. Do like, okay, this corridor, what do you guys have for recommendations? Superior's small enough that we potentially could open it up. But it was really cool, and like I said, hundreds of proposals came through.
I'm actually just I'll shoot out an email to Allison right now, because she and I kind of worked on this open source thing. She found it through the city of Westminster.
Cool.
So maybe we just dust that off.
I mean, and so I guess the only thing there is when we have our meeting to get the thing together, we would probably want to have this before that. On the other hand, we don't know if there's probably not going to be any budget next year for
Right.
trails. I mean, because Wildflower Park isn't paid back, and it was what, 2022 when we thought the funds would be coming back.
Dr. Cog match money is either 2021 and construction in 2022. I think it's 2021 is the funding year and 2022 is like the construction year.
Okay. For when we will be looking at trails.
At trails.
Again, so.
And even that's tough because right now, when that Dr. Cog trail
Mhm.
would likely take up any available
Yeah.
trail funds to be the match for the larger grant or something along those lines.
I guess the only reason I bring that up is I don't know if we want to get a public engagement
Right.
going too soon and then we don't have any money for it and it's sort of anticlimactic. So maybe we talk about this in the leadership meeting. Like when we get together with ProStack to figure out how we're going to put this list together, that would be a good thing to discuss. I don't know, what other interesting conversations, did you guys have anything else you talked to people about in terms of trails or open space? I mean, people are always in favor of, people always say, yes, more open space, right? That's never contentious with anyone I've talked to. That's always fun.
I thought it was good to have the how to get in touch cards.
Okay.
Because a lot of people were like, well, who should I talk to about this?
Oh,
And
cool.
it's like, oh, well, you want the board to spend more money on
Yeah.
open space? Here's their email address right here on this
Yeah,
card.
it was
and
great.
Send them a note or whatever. And so having that was a really good thing, and making sure that we know who to send people to for that kind of thing. I mean, obviously, when they're talking about trails and open space, we remember and talk about it, but if there's a decision that has to be made town-wide, it's probably more likely to be the board that's doing that. And so, sending the message directly to them is good too.
Yeah, you
And
told
it's
about
stuff like
a
that.
handful of people, just email the board.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Please email the board.
Well, and I know.
I know you guys
Sandy.
have to
That's what we
expand.
get paid all that money for.
But kudos to, Kate kind of spurred that whole thing. She's like, we need a way to tell people about all their communication options. And we tried our one pager and that kind of stunk. And then the town came up with the postcard
That's awesome.
idea that's been
That's
really
great.
good. So it's really cool to see how that's worked out. So kudos.
And the other thing that I thought was good was having OSAC and ProStack right next to each other, because a lot of people wanted to talk about trails and parks and stuff at the same time, so, we could just kind of send a
though it's not open space, there was a lot of positive feedback I heard about the skate park. People were just raving
Good.
about how much time they're spending down there
Good.
and how much they love it. I mean, I got,
It's packed all the
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
95 degrees, and
Yep.
it's packed down there. It's unbelievable. It's great. Probably really hot. Really great. It's very cool.
I think overall it was a good event for us.
I like so.
Yeah, awesome. So,
And wait,
What?
we talked about a kickball team.
oh yeah, we gotta maybe put together a committee kickball team.
Yes.
How did we forget that?
We'll have to float that again as we get closer, but that could be fun.
You guys can do it seasonally, because then you can do a committee curling
Yes.
at the sports stable and do
Oh.
committee curling and then
Have
committee
you guys
kickball.
done that? Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. And it's not as hard as you think it is. You know, you
Yeah.
see the Olympics and they're out there
They're very
balanced.
intense.
No, you just stand there and you kind of throw this rock down there, and if it gets close, great, and if it doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter.
Drink another beer.
Right.
Well, they're actually very, I was actually surprised at how liberal that is during the event. But I've seen, but they only had it on the half ice, and now they've got it on the full ice. So next season will be
Wow.
full length curling, so.
We're working with, it's officially called now the Coal Creek Curling Club.
saw that.
We're working with the sports stable
Oh,
and
that's
doing some
awesome.
partnership stuff to kind of bring it to the community. So there you go, kickball and curling.
Yeah, hey, that's awesome.
I thought we were all getting into pickleball.
Well, there's that too.
That'll be next summer.
Okay.
That one's coming.
Yeah, I heard there's gonna be more pickleball courts in town centers, someone said. Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard all kinds of stuff. I think we'll end up building them next year though, probably down in Autry Park. So.
Coal Creek reconstruction, are you done?
Yeah, so we're working a lot with urban drainage now on the establishment piece of it. And
What does that mean?
just making sure that all the plant material stays alive, that all the plant
Oh, okay.
material's in. That Peter brought up, making sure that all the species are correct with what was documented. So we've already had a handful of questions because, you know, we start to see things like weeds pop up. We're like, well, are the weeds gonna take over? Is it urban drainage's role to take care of it? Is it staff's role to take care of it? So, but we're largely done with that part of the project. And then we're looking at doing some overlot grading over in the area and then the seeding to put the native seed back until we're ready to fund the parks.
Oh, so in the area where the parks will be, to
Mhm.
just get that seeded and.
Yeah, that way it just doesn't look like a
So it's just
mud
not being
field.
dirt.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, it looks great. And it was fun to see it last time, but now it's all filled in and the
Mhm.
grass is starting to grow, and it does look a little interesting now where there's just this little strip of green, but when it gets seeded, it'll look even better.
And we know, you know, the coyotes never really left, but I've heard now multiple about the coyotes being back down in there, or a coyote being back down in there.
Okay.
And we've seen some, you know, we've seen a couple of rabbits jumping around, so it does look like once you kind of vacate out of there. But it also could be that stuff is just always hanging out, kind of on that more wooded side, so.
Okay. All right, we're on to standing updates. So Conservation Fund, Tracy's not here. I don't have any update. I don't know. Patrick, if you do? Okay. Rocky Mountain Greenway, Joel's not here. He sent out some updates. I guess just stuff from the news. I've seen that the soil sampling, I think actually has started out there. So I think that's a good step for all of us, just to know what they're gonna find out there. And then I know, I haven't been following it as closely as I wish I was, but the continuation of the Parkway, I know that there's been more meetings on that, but has anybody else been following or?
All I know is that Mayor Pro Tem Laces reported on it at the board meeting on Monday, and correct me guys, but he talked about the soil sampling, which is really good because it hasn't been done forever,
Mhm.
for a long time, and it's good to know what the hell's there. But he also said there's an issue about Broomfield kicking in the $2.5 million that they're supposed to kick in.
Well,
Do you
they just
remember?
they have not scheduled to vote on it at this point in time. They
Okay.
had a straw poll at the end of it, just to see what everybody felt. They didn't do it, and then they did not determine to put it on the agenda at this point, so.
Okay.
At this, you know, Mark said, as soon as if he hears something, he'll let us know, but for now.
Okay.
The only update that we have is, in terms of the Greenway Trail itself, is everything will be on hold pending the soil sample.
Okay, that's good.
Yep.
That's good, good
Yeah.
to know, yeah.
Okay. Marcy, anything on, or anybody, anything on oil and gas?
The regulations haven't come out yet, they're still working on it, and I know that, there have been, the commission's basically on hold, all permits are basically on hold, waiting for the regulations, so.
So just remind me, these are the regulations for the bill that we.
That was passed, the oil and gas bill that
Okay,
was
yeah.
passed. Although that's the law, the regulations say how you implement the law, and they haven't been issued yet, so everyone's kind of waiting for that. So I actually checked this morning to see what's going on, and it's all quiet, waiting, yeah. I think all the permits are on hold,
Okay.
at least I hope they are.
And then Raptor program, is there anything else? I mean, we talked a lot about bird boxes and whatnot, but is there anything else that Vanessa wanted to pass on?
She would have the best idea, but just as an update, her monitoring team, I think, has been looking at somewhere between 8 and 10 raptor nests in and very near the edges of Superior this year. I think most of the nesting is pretty much done for the year, and that the young birds are leaving the nest, but they'll still be staying around, being fed by their parents and learning to hunt and so forth. But it seemed like it was a pretty successful year for the raptors, our urban adapted raptors in town. Not so much for the ones that we're trying to attract with the boxes.
Mm.
It was, I think I shared this, but one morning I was over at Williams Field and we found an owl caught up in the soccer net.
Really?
Yeah, it was early in the morning. It was what, like, were you there
Wow.
that morning?
Mhm.
Oh, we were just running around back then. We're like, whoa, what is that? And it was caught. So we
Oh,
called
yeah.
just the non-emergency
Yeah.
line, and they called animal control. And she was able to come out before like we left. And it's like, yeah, I was just able to get him out of there,
Yeah,
and he
that's
flew
good to
away.
hear.
Like the wing wasn't broken as soon as we got him out.
So then the net closest to the creek?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because there's a nest.
So that soccer, not the big one on the parking lot side you're talking?
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
the other side by the scoreboard over there.
Huh,
Yeah, on that
okay.
side, that's
Yeah.
the north side
Yep.
of the field. Yeah, it was pretty wild. But yeah, is there a scoreboard there or where?
Yeah, no, there's a scoreboard.
But it was really just cool that she was able to.
That is awesome.
She walked away and she goes, these usually don't go that well.
Yeah.
And she was done. So
Mm.
That's cool.
it was a fun thing to see. So, one thing back to 4th of July, Patrick, one question people were asking me about the new trail on Marshall. Will that have a guardrail? You know, the new bike path that's right along the road there?
Yeah.
Do you know if that'll be
Somebody else asked that.
protected from cars?
I will follow up.
Okay, I got that question a couple times.
I'm almost certain the answer is yes, but I want to verify with.
It seemed like it would be,
Yeah.
because it's so close
Yeah.
that it seems like it would, what's the point of a path if it's not protected?
Yeah, no, I'm almost positive. What I'm not positive of, if it's the entire run
Okay,
or if it's just in certain areas, but I'll
Okay.
follow up. That's a good question.
thank
But
you.
last time I was by there, I think they were actually putting up a fence
Okay,
in at least part of it.
I was over there last week and I don't recall, but I also was looking at fence or guardrails.
Yeah, maybe it was just part of the.
I'll try it out that way.
construction barriers or something.
all right. The only other standing update, and I know it's not on here, but I'm gonna mention it anyway. We got that email from Karen about the CAPS intensive. Please just let me know. I mean, she understands that it's last minute and we have up to 3 slots, but we don't have to put 3 people in there. I think my schedule is available, so I'll be able to go. But I just need to know yes or no by the 15th so I can fill out the roster.
Is that on the 17th,
It's on the 18th or 19th.
18th?
Yeah, so just send me an email. I'll have to manage it by email.
And it's only open to committee members.
For For this one.
For this one, okay.
For
That's
this
what I-
one.
that's how I-
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
two,
Thursday.
there are two other opportunities
Okay.
open to the public, and we heard Monday is probably an additional one. This is with the consultants from Happy City,
Cool.
which is a fantastic book, if anybody, about kind of community building and placemaking, so it's gonna be, we're excited about it.
I wanna go.
Okay. With that, we're adjourned, and that might be the fastest meeting ever for us, at least this year, so.
It's still
Thank you,
light out.
everybody. I
find that
know.
miraculous.
I
that
know.
I'm here for a meeting and I'm leaving before it's.
So mark it at 8:12, we are adjourned.
Wow.
Thank you for everyone, for your time tonight. I actually got through a lot. And then, Kate, I'll work to put together that agenda, even though I'll be out. I'll get that. And then, obviously if you want to change it, whatever, but I'll get that, my thoughts on it. And then I'll help to coordinate some of these recommendations for next time. Now, and the big one is the email on the schedule.
On the 14th, I have it out, my computer's not
Oh.
connecting to the internet, so.
Okay.
So I'll.
Oh, yeah, were
I'll
you
get
gonna
back
send that
out.
or me? I don't remember.
I'll do it.
Okay,
I
perfect.
already have it done.
Awesome.
It's just, I need to open my computer.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll have some good recommendations. I mean, Saharius will be fun to get out there, and the Bird Box, and trail ranking, and
I can't believe it's August now.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Well, we've done a lot, though.
We've actually got a lot
We need
done.
bodies to vote on this stuff.
This is the first time this has ever happened, though. It's just a perfect storm of vacation and Sean's son making the state championship, and
Oh,
I think
really? In what?
in baseball.
Um,
And then Joel, something came up with work, I think, or maybe it was one of his kids, I don't know. His life is hectic. I don't know how he keeps it together. Well, thank you all very much.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Fantastic.
Oh.
I think this bird box thing is great. None of the boxes are gonna be in like established communities, right? They're all kind of, I mean, people can't come and say they're ugly.
Are you gonna go,
So
you
then
be
that's,
there tomorrow?
that's a consideration, right? Because.
Well, it's a serious
I know, I don't-
consideration.
I
We're spending
slept
$50 a
until
box. These things are
8:30
pretty
this morning.
plain.
Oh, nice.
And I haven't
Well,
done it
and then, if you have to put